Here.
Edward.
Here.
Dorian. Khan.
Here.
Morrison. Here. Seifert.
Here.
For the record, Mr. Gurian is he's out of town. He'll be joining us by phone later. As always, the mission of District 15 is to provide to produce world-class learners by building I can't speak this evening, by building a connected learning community. One other thing I would like to mention, we are having some trouble with some of our microphones, so we don't all have microphones this evening. We have the two, and we have table mics to pass around. So if anybody's having trouble hearing, please let us know that, and we'll have it fixed for our next meeting. Dr. Thompson.
All right, we have some of our world-class learners with us tonight from Plum Grove Junior High. Dr. Carrie Wilson will introduce the model citizens from that school.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Superintendent Thompson, and Board President Mrs. Babcock, and our audience, and our parents, and our students. Thank you for coming tonight. They all have such busy schedules. I'm going to let our students introduce themselves. They're here tonight because they really put forth such great effort at Plum Grove. I am so proud of them for their leadership and the quality character that they lead every day in our school. So I will let them introduce themselves this evening.
My name is Jack Walsh, and I'm in 8th grade.
I'm Regina Stoner, and I'm in 7th grade.
Nice bow tie.
I'm Michaela Brown, and I'm in 7th grade. Hi, my name is Lisa Brazzi, and I'm in 8th grade. I'm Emily Alvia, and I'm in 8th grade.
My name is Julian Campbell, and I'm in 8th grade.
At this time, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks for your good work at Plum Grove. The board has a light pen here for you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Each October, the board invites the PTA presidents to come and be recognized. The board greatly appreciates all the time and energy that the PTA puts into making a difference for kids and engaging families. And we have the council president with us here today, Jeanette. Jeanette's going to come up and she's going to introduce PTA presidents that were able to come tonight.
Good evening, President Babcock, Superintendent Thompson, and members of the Board of Education. My name is Jeanette Harris, and I am president of the Northwest Suburban Council of PTA and PTSA. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to address the board tonight as you recognize the presidents of the 20 PTA and PTSA local units within District 15. The mission of the PTA is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children, every child, one voice. The Northwest Suburban Council of PTA oversees all 20 District 15 local units and acts as a liaison between our local units and the District 15 administration, the Board of Education, National PTA, Illinois PTA, and Northwest Cook Region PTA. Our council has a total of 28 local unit presidents, co-presidents, and president-elect officers that lead their individual PTAs and boards within their schools. PTAs in District 15 work to extend students' learning by providing assemblies, enrichment, and classroom resources. They bring their diverse communities together in family programs and events, provide parent resources and education, cultural arts opportunities, and programs that promote safety and healthy living. And they do all this because they care about our children. They want each of them to reach their highest potential, be confident, healthy, and successful students and future citizens. These presidents have many parents serving on boards with them. The number of hours of parent involvement goes well into the thousands each year. We thank you for taking the time to recognize these dedicated volunteers. I'm so happy that some of our presidents were able to juggle their schedules and join us this evening, and for those who could not join us, we thank them as well. Would the presidents that came tonight please join me? We have from Carl Sandburg, Melissa Werner. From Lincoln, we have Stephanie Kiesler. From Conyers Learning Academy, Karen Steffler. From Pleasant Hill, Brian Lucas. We have Graham Sanborn, Darlene Grimmy, and Frank C. Whiteley, Melissa Sledgehammer.
The board has a little token of their appreciation for you tonight to take home. Just remember that we think about you, and the board members would like to come down and thank you personally by shaking your hand for all the things you do to make a difference in the world of the students at school. Our next recognition is the presentation of an Above and Beyond Award pin to Mr. Van Lee, our custodial supervisor, who was awarded the Manager of Distinction Award from Facility Cleaning Decisions magazine. He's featured in the October edition of the magazine, and Van has done a terrific job overseeing all our custodial staff. Mike or Craig, do you want to say anything?
Well, I'd like to take this time to recognize Mr. Lee for all of his effort and energies that he's done with the district for 27 years. Opportunity came along to give him a referral that would go on in a national publication, and we put him in because of his continued aspect of working with staff members, communication, working with the public as well as our own departmental areas in saving money for the district as well as increasing the effort in green cleaning and other areas of maintenance.
Mr. Lee is he's a role model in several ways, multiple ways. Primarily, he was a fantastic custodian and in charge of the largest school in the district, and he was an example for other custodians to learn from, other head custodians to learn how to manage a large building and keep it clean and efficient so the kids can learn. Mr. Lee also is an immigrant from Vietnam, coming to the United States without being able to speak any English, and he worked hard, learned English, and has climbed the ladder, and now we're the beneficiary of all this hard work and training and the things he does to make sure that the school district is operational for kids. He's also works a lot of hours, and he comes in when there's an emergency on the weekends or the evenings, and he's quite a terrific employee. So, Van, we've only given out a few of these, maybe a little over a dozen of these Above and Beyond awards, and you deserve it. We're glad you could have it tonight. The next item on my section is the student enrollment update with Dr. Parvini, and while he's coming up, we're going to call Mr. Gurian on the phone. He's in St. Louis on business, and he will be Certainly, go ahead.
All right. Dr. Thompson, President Babcock, members of the Board of Education, good evening.
Thank you. Can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
There you go.
All right. Good evening, Board Member Gurian.
Good evening.
All right. Tonight I'm going to be talking briefly about several important things. First of which is an enrollment update. Then I'm going to be talking a little bit about board targets and other guidelines that drive decisions that administrators make in terms of putting adults in front of our kids. I believe that that's arguably one of the most important things that we do as central office administrators, as well as how we are measuring up as administrators to those guidelines and or targets that are established by you, the Board of Education, as well as other governmental bodies, the state of Illinois, the Illinois State Board of Education, etc. I'll also talk briefly about classes that are at or over 30 students at our elementary level. I'll talk a little bit about financial stewardship, and then of course there'll be a thank you, because this is truly a team effort in terms of the materials that were compiled and the decisions that were made behind the materials that you and the public have this evening. So let's start with enrollment. As of September 30th, 2016, District 15 had 11,945 students enrolled in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. We had another 594 students in our preschool programming, split between our special ed services at CLA, so students receiving special education services there, as well as 471 students through our ECDEC program. It's a partnership whereby several, actually not just several, 471 at-risk students receive very, very important services which help to prepare them for success as they enter our schools as kindergartners. So that's where we're at right now. One of the things that was different about this year's student assignment report was we wanted to take a look in the past to see perhaps where we're going in the future. And so we took a look at 9 years in the past as well as this current year for a 10-year snapshot in terms of where we're at in terms of kindergarten through 8th grade as well as preschool through 8th grade enrollment. And that information is provided for you in the packet. We have a range with respect to kindergarten through 8th grade when looking at those 10 years of a high of 12,336 students in grades K-8 in 2012-2013, and a low in the range of 11,924 students in the 2009-2010 school year. As we move to the pre-K, so preschool through 8th grade figures in terms of that 10-year look, we have a high of 12,698 students in 2013-14, and then a low of 12,180 students in 2011-2012. One of the other things that we did with the good help of Dr. Tom Edgar, who runs our assessment division in the Department of Instruction, is we also included a bar graph, or actually more appropriate, a line graph that takes a look at K-8 and pre-K-8 enrollment for you in the packet and material. So, given our current enrollment, how do we go about meeting the needs and putting the right adults in front of the kids to provide them with a world-class education in District 15? We do that through class size targets that are established by you, the Board of Education. We have targets of kindergarten of 20 students. We have a target of 24 students in our primary classes, which are considered to be in grades 1, 2, and 3. 26 students as a board target in our intermediate classrooms, grades 4, 5, and 6, and 28 students in our junior high classrooms, grades 7 and 8. As with any target, it's a target that we aim for. All right, there are going to be situations where we are under the target, where we're at the target, and we're over the target. And I'll talk a little bit about what we do when we're over the target a little bit later this evening. So we take a look at those targets, and the information that is contained within the packet, as it pertains to general ed class sizes, is indicative of the fact that we really are administratively adhering to Board of Education targets in the vast majority of our general education grades. But I do want to bring attention to kindergarten because we are over board target there at 1.6 students. So if the average board target is 20 students, in terms of looking at a district-wide analysis, and it's an average district-wide of all gen ed kindergartens, we averaged out at 21.6. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to take a look at this year, as well as in the future, to determine if that's a trend that is going to exist in kindergarten, because we're going to have to make some decisions next year if that's the particular case. An additional point worth noting is our 5th grade gen ed class sizes are actually below board target with an average of 24.9, which is 1.1 students below the board target. So as we transition from general ed to bilingual self-contained classes, this district has the good fortune of being able to serve a variety of different students and needs. We know that as our community continues to change, approximately 60% of our student body, languages other than English are spoken at home, and of that 60%, 22%, so kind of looking over at my shoulder for Cheryl's approval, okay, thumbs up, that's a good thing, instead of thumbs down, 22% receive services for language because they themselves speak a language other than English. And in terms of our bilingual self-contained classrooms, those are primarily instructional level classrooms taught to students whose primary language is Spanish. And we have programs at the kindergarten level, multi-age, multi-grade programs, kindergarten and 2nd grade. And we have 3rd grade classrooms as well. We have 1 4th and 5th grade multi-age class at Lincoln Elementary that we will be evaluating this year and more than likely discontinuing next. But the point I'm trying to make there is, in terms of how we have to staff in bilingual classrooms, that they have to be 90% of what the general ed classes are at those grade levels at a site. And so the information that's presented before the board this evening indicates what the 90% average is in order to comport with state requirements in terms of how bilingual self-contained classrooms need to be staffed. And we know we are over that 90% threshold as required by the state of Illinois in our kindergarten sections by 2.1 students. In working with Dr. Wolfel, as we looked at this in a very holistic, team-centered way in terms of what's best for students, we're comfortable with the fact that we're over with respect to this particular area by 2 students on average, because what we do for bilingual kindergarten is different than what we do for typical general ed kindergarten. All of our bilingual kindergarten classrooms this year offer full-day programming for students. So if we're offering them a full-day program, all right, and then we're offering gen ed students a half day, we're comfortable being over what that 90% threshold is, because those students are receiving more and or different services to catch them up and allow them to be successful as they transition into monolingual classrooms, either in grades 3 or 4. We also are over target in our 3rd grade by 1.5 on average. And as we took a look at that, we push in additional services to those particular bilingual classrooms in the form of providing them with native lit. So that's their ELA or English Language Arts services. So that, coupled with the fact that if we were to address that and bring them at or below 90% in those particular areas, we'd be looking at bilingual self-contained classrooms below 15 students. And we felt that that wasn't in the best interest of our students either, especially because even considering the 90%, our average bilingual class sizes are 22.7 in 3rd grade, with the Board of Ed target being 24 at that grade level. So we're still below the board target. We're not just quite at the 90%, but we do push in additional services to those classrooms. So we thought that that would be appropriate as well as fiscally responsible. Which leads us to the next point. One of the board goals that is going to be presented this evening deals with financial stewardship. And financial stewardship is everyone's responsibility in terms of meeting the needs of our kids, maintaining high quality services, and seeking ways to do so where we can at lower costs. That's not an easy task, especially when you take into consideration the size of this district and the complexity of student needs across all of our campuses. And so, as I presented the same presentation last year, versus where we are this year, we are 1.58 FTE, full-time teacher equivalents, over where we were last year at this time. So 1.58 additional to the budget. Once again, with the complexity of needs in the district, the number of kids that we serve, what we are required to do with respect to board targets as well as state statutes, I really think that represents quite a good job in terms of being able to meet the needs of kids and doing so in as fiscally appropriate manner as possible, because although I'm ultimately responsible for presenting this to the board, it is a team effort, and the team and many of those team members are behind me. They know that one of the first things I ask, how can we maintain quality of services to kids, and how can we seek to do so at a lower cost? And if we have an increased need here or an emerging need here, how can we offset that over here? So we're constantly looking at ways to meet emerging needs with our existing staff. Sometimes that's just not possible. And so that's part of the reason why we're 1.58 FTE increase over last year. I want to end before questions with a thank you. This is truly what is before you this evening. It's truly a team effort. Principals work very closely with us, as well as pretty much every central office administrator, to develop the plan that's before you, so that we're meeting the needs of our students and providing them with a world-class education. So that concludes my presentation this evening.
And just a couple of questions that they're not related, but normally we get this in September. Is there a reason we get it now instead of September? Is my first question. And then looking throughout Palatin, I think there's 2 or 3, maybe even a 4th housing development going up. What do we look at for 17, 18, 18, 19, and going forward? Our projections, any idea of where we might be with those housing developments and number of kids coming in our district?
Okay, so the first question, why are we presenting now, or why am I presenting now versus in September, which has historically been the practice? And the answer to that question is to align with a state reporting requirement through the Illinois State Board of Education. Enrollment, another way of talking about enrollment, is fall housing. And every year, every public school district across the land is required on September 30th. They have to, each public school district has to provide the Illinois State Board of Education with enrollment as of that date. So what we decided administratively to do is align student assignment with that date. So the materials that are presented before you align with what our student enrollment counts were on September 30th, which is consistent with what the state receives from us, so that the information that was provided 9 years in the past is consistent in terms of what the public will see and what you will see on the Illinois State Board of Education website in terms of the District 15 enrollment there. So what we wanted to really do was align our reporting purposes here to the board with what the state would report. Otherwise, what would happen traditionally is the numbers that were presented in September were different, early in September or late August, were different than what they were on September 30th. So this is a good faith effort to get us closer to what the community will see, as well as the board will see, when the fall housing report is made available through this.
And I'm assuming not much of a difference from September 30th to October 12th.
I couldn't quantify that. I'd have to look into that. The second question that you asked is in terms of housing developments. We do have a very large single-family housing development on Ela and Algonquin Road. 80 homes, I believe, ballpark. As we receive news about families, we plan for them. That's part of the reason why at Thomas Jefferson, we've been taking a look at programming, in that building, and looking at moving some of the preschool academic programs out closer to the center or east side of the district. We're closer to where those kids would live to cut down on bus times, etc., but to also accommodate, for unknowns in terms of that subdivision. Houses are going up. Every time my wife drives by them, I think she has a little bit of buyer's remorse with respect to our house. Still a beautiful house, Lori. So we're looking at that. There's also another pretty sizable development on Algonquin as well, off Quinton, and that's an apartment complex. I think that there's upwards of 200 units there. That's in the process of being built. I think we have a better relationship at this point with the the single-family housing development on ELA in Algonquin than we do the apartment complex. We don't necessarily know how many kids we're going to generate there, but we will be making outreach efforts so that we can get some information when and where possible. They're more concerned with selling property than letting us know, who's going to be coming in there. But that doesn't mean to say that we should not try to get that information. So the development on ELA in Algonquin, that's Thomas Jefferson. The development on Quentin and Algonquin, that's Hunting Ridge. In thinking about how that development might affect Hunting Ridge this year and next, we also transitioned some of the ECDEC programs out of Hunting Ridge to other areas in the district to provide space at Hunting Ridge in the event that we needed it. So we're trying to take a long-term approach there at both Hunting Ridge and Thomas Jefferson. In the need, if we had additional need for space, we could also repurpose computer labs there into classroom space if we really needed to. So we're trying to accommodate those developments to the best we can.
Dr. Barbini, can you tell me, I've had the privilege these last few weeks, I've been going to each of the schools to take a look around and to spend some time with the principals and staff and to take a look at some of the classrooms. Some of them are extremely, extremely crowded. Can you tell me or describe to the board the process that you go through when you have a bubble class or you're looking at a class that's over target? Who works on that? I know there's been high praise for you certainly, and so I'm sure that's for the staff as well as being responsible for that. But what is the process that you go through? And then do we look at that throughout the year? Do we go back and revisit once a decision has been made?
Yes, so it's the process when we're over board targets. So it does begin with staffing conversations, which typically start in the fall. So what's being presented tonight, conversations began in the fall of 2015, and they were ongoing throughout last year, into the summer, and even after the school year started. And when we are in classes, gen ed classes, etc., that are over targets, one of the first things that's done, principals typically pick up the phone in advocacy of their students and their staff and their parent communities, and they say, Matt, we're over target. And I'm like, thank you. And one of the things then we talk about is how building principals can use existing resources in their buildings in the form of program assistants, in the form of reading specialists, etc., to provide additional adult support in those particular classrooms of need. There are some times, though, where classes are at the level where even existing staff, we believe professionally and ethically at the building and district level where that's not enough. And in those particular instances, once the school year starts, what we typically look at doing is allocating additional paraprofessional or PA time. So that's what we did at Marion Jordan, for example. I know I said I was going to talk about classes that are at or over 30. There are 5. 4 of those 5 are gifted 5-6 classes. One of them is a general ed first grade classroom at Marion Jordan. We hit 30 students in that classroom after the school year began. We made the decision in working collaboratively with the building principal, Principal Grosh, to add additional paraprofessional time in that particular building so that an additional adult would be in those classrooms or in that particular first grade classroom for literacy or English language arts and math instruction. So we first start by looking at meeting new or emerging needs with existing staff. There are times, the Marion Jordan example, but there are others, where we, have to look at allocating additional staff. We typically allocate PA time once the school year begins. If we start approaching or we hit 30 before the school year starts, that's typically when we consider opening up an additional section, especially at the early elementary levels. So that would be, first grade, second grade, third grade, where the board target is 24. And then we monitor classes. So if we know that one year a class size is high, we typically make a good faith effort to lower that class size the following year. We try to do that with existing staff first. Sometimes we have to open up an additional section, and that's part of the dynamic piece there. We had Lincoln parents come out earlier in this year talking about class size issues in their first grade classroom. All right, so actually it wasn't this year, it was last year. So they came and they talked about how, they had concerns on a variety of different levels for class size. What we did with respect to that is we did look at allocating additional staff there so that those particular students in those particular sections wouldn't be significantly over board target, 3 to 4 kids over board target multiple years in a row. So that's also a part of how we factor into that, with well over 300 gen ed sections throughout the district. So hopefully that answers the question.
Any other question?
Matt, just a quick question. I know that we have the board target, and since maybe now and over the last couple of years, has there been anything from the administration? Do you feel comfortable with those targets? Meaning, are those targets consistent with your professional opinion and staff about whether that those are the targets that we should be shooting for?
That's a good question, Zubair. I'm going to answer it this way. I think that those class size targets they were established, and they've been well established throughout the district. I think that what we would have to do is really holistically look at that. But I think to make any type of changes moving forward, but any change down or up would impact the larger staffing needs in the district. If we were to decrease, that would mean that would be quite possibly a pretty significant increase in staff. But not everywhere, because kids don't always show up in neat, tidy packages in every building, in every section. And as a parent of 2 not first graders, 1-year-old boys that turned 1 last week, I know that there's a lot of unpredictability there. But I think that what we would have to do is we'd have to review that. But we also know from research, there's a researcher by the name of John Hattie, that it's not so much the class size that matters, it's the instructional strategies that the teachers use in those classrooms that does. But that's a very emotional thing, because given that everyone pretty much went to school, unless you were homeschooled, everybody typically is an expert. Hey, I went to school, I know what it's like. Hey, I think lower class sizes is the way to go. Well, this research indicates something very different than that. It's about what the teacher does with the students in his or her classroom, and that's why it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we give our teachers the very best. And you as a board have done that with respect to our math pilot, which was adopted in our elementary buildings this year. We're piloting currently in junior highs for next, so we're providing that guaranteed and viable curriculum, and we're continuing to seek ways. And Dr. Meg Schnorr is doing a great job with this in the Department of Instruction, providing our teachers with the tools, strategies, and materials needed to be successful. So I think that as long as we continue to see our kids being competitive with respect to the measures of academic progress, MAP, continuing to be competitive, with respect to PARC, I think we're going to be okay. And as long as we're continuing to see growth, I don't really necessarily see the need to revisit that. But that being said, the building principal is going to be closest to this issue. And if there are unique factors that exist within any one section, behaviorally, academically, or both, that the principal's concerned about, we're going to work with that principal, and it might mean that we have to make some decisions for that particular grade level at that particular school. So the long answer to your question is, I don't think we need to do anything with the board targets. I think it would be a much larger discussion. If we were to look at that, we'd have to look at what the impacts are. I think it all boils down to growth. As long as our kids are continuing to improve, I think we're doing our jobs.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the presentation. Just want to bring back on a couple things. I think we are comfortable with the board targets. As Matt said, this research indicates that it's mainly teacher strategies and teacher techniques that really make the greatest impact on student learning, not the number of kids in the classroom. We have done an analysis, I think, if we were to lower the board targets by just 1 student in each of the grade levels, it would be $1.5 million more for our annual budget, so it's quite expensive. And we think that that $1.5 million going towards professional development and other supplies and resources for teachers would be much better spent, so we're comfortable with those. Matt also mentioned that we do have full-day kindergarten programs for our bilingual students, and I just want the board to be reminded that those dollars come from our federal grants, Title III dollars, and so that money to pay for those full-day kindergarten is coming from the federal government, not from our regular budgets, our regular tax base. All right, the next item in my section is my report. The first item is the board annual goals. At our board administration retreat in the spring, we came up with some general goals that we wanted to focus on for the year. And at the last board meeting in September, the board adopted the goals. And what I bring to you tonight is kind of a layout of the plan to complete those goals and to measure those goals as we go throughout the year. So the first goal is really to reduce the student achievement gaps, examine achievement in all groups of students, and create a plan or plans to reduce and eliminate gaps between different groups of students. And I've got the action managers there. The team is going to tackle that. What we're going to use is our school improvement plans that Tom Edgar has really worked on, so that every school has the same school improvement plan, focusing on an underperforming subgroup in each school, and creating a plan to eliminate or lessen that gap. And what we're going to use is we'll use the assessment in spring to determine whether our goal has been met effective in reducing or eliminating the gap. Second goal really is to enhance the learning and organizational development of the district. And we want to make sure that our schools are places creating successful young people who are knowledgeable, emotionally and socially healthy, motivated, civically inspired, engaged in the arts, prepared for work and economic self-sufficiency, and ready for the world. Again, I've got the action managers, the teams. What we decided to use as the results to determine whether we were achieving this goal is really to look at the PBIS results, that's the positive behavior intervention and supports. And those are the ways that we make sure that kids have the skills necessary to be successful in school and in the classrooms. It's also the same skills that they'll need to be successful in the world. And we're also working on creating a junior Harper Promise program. Remember, the Harper Promise program is those students as freshmen that pledge to meet specific standards throughout their career in high school. If they hit all the things that they need to hit, they can earn tuition at Harper College for up to 2 years worth of tuition. And so we're going to try to instill some of those same habits that they're going to need to be successful in the Harper Promise program through our junior Harper Promise program. And we'll gather data about how well kids are achieving those things. So we'll come back at the end of the school year and share that with the board. We also wanted to work on effective nutritional offerings in the district. We want to evaluate the nutritional service offerings to our students and identify areas that we can enhance the offerings to those kids. Looking to improve nutrition and providing some culturally responsive food. So Matt's going to be the action manager of that, and Mike was introduced to a consultant at one of his conferences, and we contacted her, and she's volunteered to come work for us. Of course, we're going to pay her. She's got volunteered to do it free, but she will work with us. This consultant who's been nationally recognized. We'll also use the Health and Wellness Committee. Matt will establish a nutrition committee, and we'll also involve nutrition services. But that group will work on making recommendations, and they'll come with the recommendations and present those to the board by April. And we're hoping that the board will approve some or all of the recommendations, and that those will be implemented in the fall of 2017. Communications was our fourth goal, and we want to create a superintendent's community relations committee in order to increase strategic communication, driving high-quality, frequent two-way communications with all stakeholders, and Matt and I will be the action managers for that. We created a community relations committee. That committee will be continuing to meet and create a plan that will be presented to the board in February on how to really enhance our communications, and we're hoping that from the presentation to the board in February, that the board will approve that plan, and the plan will be implemented in September 2017. And the last goal is really resource stewardship, ensuring that the district remains fiscally responsible while maintaining our high-quality educational programs and facilities. And we're going to look as well to seek ways to reduce the burden on our real estate taxpayers whenever possible. Mike Adamczyk is going to be our action manager on that, and he's going to involve some other people you can see there listed. The results will make, as long as we have a budget with revenues over expenditures, and we're increasing our fund balances, I think that'll be the results we're hoping for. And I think the measures will be our audited financials, which come every November, so we'll be able to see after the end of the year whether we attain that goal. But those are the goals, and excited and already working on them. The last item in my section is just a quick update on the referendum presentations. We continue to have presentations at schools, homeowners associations, we've gone to some partisan political groups, we've gone to the League of Women Voters. And I think these sessions have afforded residents and parents the opportunity to obtain more information, ask questions, and make comments. We received some good feedback from people, good questions that are thoughtful, that I think have caused us to kind of reflect and see if we can make the planning go better. We know that we're not going to be able to please 100% of the people, but I think they've been good. I wouldn't say they've been enjoyable, but they've been productive, and I think that the information that's gone both ways has been helpful. But there have been some criticisms of the referendum, and one of them is that it's been too hurried. And I think that there are some specific reasons that I've shared with people at these events. One of the reasons why the process has been accelerated is interest rates are at historically low rates right now, and issuing bonds this time would definitely save the district money if we were going to issue bonds. The interest rates are only going to go up in the future, probably in the near future. Each year the project is delayed, there's a 4% increase on materials and labor, and on $130 million, it's about $5.2 million each year that construction is delayed. And I don't know that it was necessarily hurried. I know some people feel it was, but the committee was informed of the Facilities Plan Committee in January 2016, and information has continued to go out about the work that they were doing. And at the April board meeting, the plan was shared, and the board worked on that over a course of 3 months, and then decided that in August that they would put it to the voters to decide. And so I think there's been some time. It certainly could have taken a longer time, but I think there are other factors, the ones I've already mentioned. But the most important reason for kind of moving forward on the November ballot is that each year we wait, children are not going to receive the benefit of the plan. Full-day kindergarten, they're not going to be going to the schools that are aligned with their high schools, that our curriculum won't be aligned with the way our schools are structured. We'll still have kids crossing railroad tracks and buses. There are many things that the plan presents that are beneficial to kids, and right now, as soon as we could get the schools built, would be the fall of 2019, and kids that are 2 now would be kids would benefit from full-day kindergarten. If we wait, some kids that aren't even born yet might not even get the benefits of full-day kindergarten. So that's, I think, the reason why we've I think the board and I have decided to move the process forward without having a more extensive community kind of process. We think that we're getting some good feedback at these community meetings. I think there's some things we can continue to look at changing. And the larger community will be weigh in on the November 8th ballot. So I think there's been community input. I think we can continue to get community input. We'll have 3 years, if the plan is approved on November 8th, we'll have 3 years to kind of modify the plans and change them, listen to the community and see if there are things to be changed. So I will continue to get community input, even though we've gone kind of quickly, as it seemed to some people. They've said there's some unknown costs and factors associated with this, and there are always unknown costs and factors when you're running the school district. As Matt said, we had an increase of 1.58 staff members this year, but our number of students went down by 73 students, I think. But if you think about that, that's only 4 kids per school that the enrollment is decreased, and our students don't come in nice neat packages, and so each year we have to adjust and we have to modify what we're doing based upon unknown factors. And so we don't know exactly how many kids are going to come from these developments. We can only plan for it as best we can. But I think that many of these things will be settled by the time these schools will be opened up, and the unknown factors are going to have answers in the course of the next few years. And then there are people that are asking about the unfinished health, life, and safety work. And we will continue to make sure that our buildings are safe. We'll continue to tackle some of these items. Remember that the architect is required to put a cost associated with the items, as if an outside firm were to come in and take care of those items, plus a 10% contingency fee. So that's what the state requires the architect to do. But many of the things on the list of B items, they're not really they're just code violations, not safety issues. I went through and I picked up a few things, interior hollow metal frames of old doors are rusted and deteriorated. Our crew is planning to take care of that. We won't pay for an outside service, and we've already got those people on staff. We've got penetrations in walls that compromise fire resistance, even though there hasn't been a fire since 1957, I don't think. But we are going to fill those penetrations by our own crew. So it'll only be the cost of materials, not the cost that was associated with what the architect had to submit to the state. Some missing glass that we'll replace in-house, deteriorated or damaged countertops and backsplashes. These aren't safety issues. They're things that we need to take care of, and we will take care of them in-house. A wall base is coming loose and presents a tripping hazard. Our guys will glue it back on or replace it. So many of these things that are on the B item list will be taken care of in-house, and we believe that we'll be able to take care of things that we need to take care of with the $3 million or some reserve funds over the course of the next 10 years or so. And we don't think that this should be an issue that should really turn people away from seeing the merits of the plan. This referendum plan has a lot of merits and benefits a lot of kids. So that's just my update on the presentation.
Any comments or questions? Okay. We'll move on to, before we move on to reading and acceptance of the minutes, if there are any citizens that wish to address the board, I've already received some green sheets. If there are more to be filled out, if you could get those for Secretary Mrs. Becker, we would appreciate that, and that'll be coming up shortly. Moving on to item 5, reading and acceptance of the minutes. May I have the suggested motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the following meetings of the Board of Education. September 14th, 2016, regular Board of Ed meeting is presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Babcock?
Aye.
Chapman?
Aye.
Edward?
Aye.
Gray?
Aye.
Con?
Aye.
Morrison?
Aye.
Seaver?
Aye.
Motion carried. We're going to move on to item 6, the board discussion and reports. Dr. Chapman, Ed Red, Council on Legislation.
I think we'll have more to report on once the legislature reconvenes in November, so pretty quiet right now.
Okay. Mr. Seifert, District 15 Educational Foundation, which I believe has a new name.
The 1-5 Foundation, the new name has been accepted, and we do have the volleyball tournament again between the staff members in November. I think we probably are full by now. I had not made the last meeting, and I'm assuming it's full by now, but I think November 22nd is the date. 12th, I'm sorry. It should be an exciting day. The first one was a lot of fun. Looks like it'll be another fun day in November.
Item 1610, the Illinois Association of School Boards Resolutions Committee Report. You all have a copy of this in your board packet. Zubair Khan has agreed to be our delegate again this year, so he will be voting for these resolutions at the delegate session in downtown Chicago at the convention. Please review those. We don't have the tally sheet that they normally send with it this year, but there aren't that many to go through, and there is a synopsis of all of them. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, I know Dr. Thompson, you had some comments that you wanted to make. If we could get those to Zubair for the next meeting, that would be helpful, and then he'll take those with him as we vote at the delegate session. Okay? Any questions? And you all have a copy of that, so. All right. Moving on to the 2017 tax levy. As we all know, next month we will be discussing the levy and voting on it in December. One of the goals that we just heard was to look for ways to work with the levy. We're always looking for ways to make it. We're asking a big ask from our district and through the schools, and we want to be as fiscally responsible as we can. Are there things we can do as far as the tax levy is concerned. I don't know the options. I don't know what those options are. I would make the recommendation that we ask our superintendent and his staff then to take a look and come to us next month, not only with a recommendation, but also with some options, if the board is agreeable to that.
Yes, I think we need to look at a couple different options going forward for this year's levy. I agree.
Any other comments or questions on that? Dr. Thompson, if
Well,
you
I
would do
think,
that.
yeah, we're happy to do that, we're glad to do that. We always are concerned about our taxpayers and the burden that taking care of the school system places on them. You know, I think we can do some things this year that we might not have been able to do in the past because we have evaluated the first year of our tenured teacher contract, and actually salaries went down this year from last year by about $200,000, Mike?
About that, correct.
About $200,000. So we actually decreased the cost of teacher salary, and so I think we're in a better position to maybe look at ways to consider the taxpayer and maybe do some things to help out. So we will come back in November with some options for you.
So it is November that you bring us back in December that we actually vote on them.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Okay, and Dr. Barbini, you are back with first reading of policy, board policy.
Good evening again. This evening, I am coming to the board with some suggested revisions to an existing policy, Board of Education Policy 8:80, Community Relations. And the whole reason that these revisions and or additions are being recommended at this time for first reading basically boils down to the importance of partnerships, especially with our parent community. This evening we recognize our PTA presidents for the valuable work, we're still here, many of them, for their valuable work that they do on behalf of their children, the staff and administration at their schools, as well as throughout the district and the state of Illinois. And it's with that in mind that administration is recommending for first reading, first of two readings, that in the spirit of the work that the Parent-Teacher Association does at each of our buildings and then across the district, is to recognize them, the PTA, in each of our schools by charter with the Illinois PTA and the National PTA as the parent organization, which is recognized by the Board of Education in this district from this point forward, well, at least from the point forward in which there's a second reading and approval. So that's what's out there for first reading.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I was surprised it wasn't in policy initially.
For sure.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to citizens addressing the board. If you wish to address the board, please, you've completed the form. We'll open the meeting for public comment. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Superintendent Thompson will get back to you. Please state your name and identify any group that you represent. Please limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. If someone previously has articulated something with which you agree, please state that you agree rather than reiterating the entire comment. Finally, avoid comments specific to any person, student, or staff member respecting their right to privacy. This is not the forum to comment on personnel issues. And our first speaker, I know I'm going to mess this up. Christia? Christia, you're going to have to tell me your last name when you get up here. If I can have you see where the microphone is, that will be helpful. And take your time.
I'm pretty good at this. My name is Krisha Melzarek. I live at 2095 East Old Hicks Road, Palatine. And thank you for your time. I'll keep this brief. We're in the final weeks before the election, and I know that there have been many meetings held regarding the referendum. And I'm sure every question that could be asked has been asked, and every comment that could be made has been already made. And so I'm here today to just share some of my thoughts on the referendum and as a former PTA board member, a parent, and a very concerned member of the community, I appreciate your time. I've supported our schools and our park district for the 39 years I've lived here in Palatine. My children, my 3 daughters, got a terrific education. They attended Lake Louise, Winston Campus, and Palatine High School. Before I go into my comments, I want everyone to think back a little bit on your youth, and I'm sure many of you had your parents tell you at one time, if something sounds too good to be true, chances are it's too good to be true. And follow your gut. If something doesn't feel right, there's a good chance it doesn't feel right. I've said this to my own children, my parents said it to me. So having said that, whether it's intended or not, sugarcoat it, dress it up how you will, when we talk about the Northeast School, it feels to me like segregation. Studies have shown that children learn best when integrated. I'm a product of that. My parents did not speak English for the first 20 years we were here in the U.S. I went into a school not speaking English at all, integrated and learned quickly. I saw that with the children that my kids went to school with at Lake Louise. So then I have to ask myself, is it about the test scores? Is it about parents not wanting ethnic or low-income families in their school? Is there pressure to accommodate upper crust? I certainly hope not, but sometimes it feels like that to me. I think about the middle school that's proposed. Wow, 38 acres, can accommodate 1,200 kids, will probably have less than 1,000. Feels to me a little bit like Stevenson High School campus. Pretty elaborate. But then I look at the other end of town and I see 1,200 children put on 7.7 acres of land smack in the middle of a small neighborhood. $70 million for a junior high. What about the other junior highs? What about Winston Campus, Plum Grove, Sandburg? Why must this school be so elaborate? Dr. Thompson, I believe yesterday, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a comment was made about Falcon Park and Osage. I live directly across the street from Osage Park. I've lived there 39 years, and I have seen firsthand how much that green space is used. I gave you some pictures, there's many more. I've talked to people that have gone to that park for the last 3 months. Hispanic, Russian people, Polish. This is their mecca. This is their gathering place. You talked about, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's green space at Falcon. Falcon's a great facility, but it's a facility. I've attended a number of park board meetings, and there's no playground there. There's no picnic shelter, no baseball diamond, no soccer field, and no plans to put any of those in the near future. The folks that go to Osage Park, they go there with their families. Many cannot walk to other parks, as Winston Park has 5 beautiful green spaces, beautiful parks within walking distance. We have Falcon, which doesn't really offer anything to these families. This is where they're having their baby showers, their first communions, their family gatherings. Families are pulling a wagon with their children, kicking a soccer ball while the mom's cooking on a grill because they may not have them at the apartment that they're living in. To take that away from them would be terrible. It would be terrible. I feel like the Board of Education, when they were planning, did not really look at the traffic flow and how building a school in the Northeast is going to affect that community. It's not a lot of property there. There have been over 120 accidents in the last 5 years on Old Hicks Road alone. Just on Old Hicks between Lake Cook and Culvers, 120. People being hit, cars total. I don't see it getting better. And to put children in that area to walk to school, I don't feel that would be a safe environment for them. Sanborn, and I won't spend too much more time of your time, but Sanborn, I saw a recent video and I was appalled to see this video on the internet. And if that is the case, that school is in that condition, shame on the school board. It's on our school district for not maintaining those schools. When I was PTA president, we were doing a lot of building in our district. A lot of schools were adding on, and they were updating a lot of the schools. How could we not maintain that? That saddens me also to uproot the children in that community and to move them to other schools. Yet, Pleasant Hill being isolated and not touched at all. It saddens me and it doesn't feel good to me. Again, whether these are intended or not, it just doesn't feel good. Finally, and this is a question, and I know that no one will maybe answer this, but given all the comments and all the meetings that have taken place, does the school board truly feel, in your gut, do you feel that this proposal which you presented was the best laid plan for our children and our community? Given all the questions and concerns that was brought up, I don't feel it is. And finally, I have to admit that over the years, I have not paid very close attention to the people that hold these seats on the school board. I am very hopeful always that the people that sit here are really looking at everything involving the community, but I have to tell you, I don't feel that way today. Make no mistake, I am going to pay very close attention to the people that are going to occupy these seats and going forward, not just on the school board, but on the park board. I'm disappointed, I'm hoping for the best, and I hope that we are going to do the best for our children going forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Len Green.
Is this the working mic?
Yes.
I'm going to stand, if you don't mind, because I've been sitting too long. Hopefully this works. My name's Len Green, Edgewater Lane, Palatine. Two topics. First of all, I just want to refer back to the point about the discussion about the 2017 levy, where I think the board asked the administration to come back with some options about the levy. As a taxpayer, I'd like to see the board provide the administration with some direction, because that's normally what boards do. I think it's not up to the administration to come up with a list. I think it's up to the board to set some strategy. Doesn't happen often, doesn't happen at District 211 either, but I think it's time for strategy to be set by the board, to be refined, discussed, augmented, but I don't think it should be left to the administration. Secondly, I just want to turn to the discussion about the referendum, and I've got a couple of comments on that. I am working with a group called 4district15kids.org. That is the group that's proposing no, not this plan. And I'd like to maybe just comment to the board on a couple of reasons why many of us are saying no, not this plan. It's not as if it's not needed. It definitely is needed. Palatine has changed. I got here 25 years ago. There were 39,000 residents. I think it's now 67,000. Okay. But here are the main reasons. The engagement with we the people was not good enough. There was some. But let's just contrast. The Facilities Planning Committee 2.0 was hand-picked. The Committee for Facilities Plan 1.0, on which I sat, was by open invitation. The public was aware of it and they could apply. Okay? That's a reduction in engagement. It's not an opening of engagement. And the engagement that has happened has only happened after the board voted on the referendum question. Hinsdale, and I think it's Wheaton, Warrenville, and a couple of other districts have started the process of public engagement on a very public way prior to getting to the vote. That's a better way. A lot of these questions you would have got during that formulation stage instead of post-decision stage. Would have meant a lot more harmonious, I think, discussion about the options. The process is now too rushed, but it's only been rushed since January. There have been a few years to look at this. The life safety study, which is somewhat related, I believe, but not a total driver for this school rebuilding, was done in 2014. Speed over thoroughness is not a good idea. It's manifested itself in a plan which has got some components in it which are good, but it's got too many critical flaws. And I just want to go through a few of those right now. The process by which the proposal was made by FBC2 to the board and adopted contained too many key flaws, and I want to run through a couple for you. In the the Facilities Planning Committee 1.0 recommendation in June of last year, we recommended that because of the level of life safety studies plus the changing nature of Palatine, that the board conduct a long-term strategic plan to frame the way in which this particular idea is being discussed right now. I don't believe there's a long-term strategic plan. I wondered what happened to that recommendation. I wondered how you could come up with a proposal if you haven't got a long-term strategic plan to frame it. There's a poor review of the options. You were presented with one option: close Sanborn, build 2 other schools. There was no discussion of other options. I spoke to one of the members who sat on both the first and the second committees and asked, how did you arrive at this proposal, at this recommendation? And what other options did you look at? And what approach did you follow to kind of consider the pros and cons of each option? And she says, we didn't. And I just wonder how thorough that is. Normally, when you're facing some major strategic issues as an organization, you weigh up different options. Should we put a school here? Should we put a school there? Should we change boundaries? Should something be closed? Are there options to deal with things? And you go through a rigorous debate to flush things out. There's no evidence that that was done to arrive at the conclusion that you did vote on. There's too many answers. I think everybody knows, and it's been commented, there's too many answers that have come about, that have changed. The numbers have been this, they've gone to that. It could be this, it could be that. There's imprecision, or we'll look at that later. We assume this is going to happen. That's not the way to convince the public that you've got a good grasp of what really is going to be done. Okay. Finally, let's look really at the finances. It's incredible how the life safety study started with about $100 million, and I'm talking about numbers that were quoted by the board. That's now apparently dwindling down close to 25 million. And there's a lack of explanation as to how the stuff that you want to do internally, you're going to be able to do internally and not harm the operating budget. Okay, just want to point out that in the first report, the life safety study, the board identified $4.3 million worth of work that it could do itself. It's 4.3. I don't know how that takes care of all the other stuff that's got to be done. And in 10 years' time, there'll be another life safety study. And history has shown that after each life safety study, there's a need to issue bonds to catch up and remediate the properties. Okay, so the fact is that in 10 years' time, it's a pretty high certainty that there'll be a need for the board to raise more. And then we run up against the district's borrowing limit. The numbers don't add up right now, and there's not a credible answer as to whether we can actually stay underneath the numbers. So something will give, or it looks like it will give. We haven't had enough debate to get assurance that it's going to be okay. The $130 million for the schools, if you do some analysis on it, we have done some research on building costs, and these are open for discussion. But the District 15 estimates by Gilbane and SCR seem to come out with a cost per square foot of somewhere between $360 and $380 a square foot. Inflation-adjusted actuals, and based on surveys done nationwide and local comparisons, for example, are the following. Bensonville built a new school at approximately $260 per square foot. That's $100 per square foot less. The SPNM new construction survey of 2014, adjusted for inflation projections to 2017, comes out at about $265 per square foot. That's, you look at that, that's potentially $25 to $30 million less that might be required if rigorous options were looked at, if reasonable costs were looked at. Okay?
Then coming close to
I know I am, and I'm about to wrap up. Thanks. The process has got elements of it which appear okay, and it's got many components of it which have got too many holes in it. The poor process and plan is no reason to rush this vote. We need a plan, it's just not this one. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Amy Nelson.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to address you. I want to take a few minutes to talk about the proposal that is being presented as part of the referendum. While I have not intended to make anything personal, let's keep this all in perspective, as when a proposal is presented with this type of price tag, and I don't just mean the dollar amount of $130 million, people are going to push back and ask questions. It would be a shame if nobody thought this would happen, and an even bigger shame if you tried to silence it. I am here to state publicly some of the questions and concerns that I and many others have. These concerns have been called attacks, fiction, opinions. I call them valid because they come from the community that you've been elected to serve. We talk about the process being rushed. FPC 2.0 was formed in January of 2016, just 9 months ago. They held several closed-door meetings with no meeting minutes taken or details provided to the community. The meetings that are being held now at each of the schools, along with other sites, should have been held between April and August. Imagine how much more the community would have felt involved and potentially lessen these alleged attacks on the board and those who support the plan. While some are rightfully concerned about the tax increase they may be facing if this referendum passes, the majority of the people concerned about the plan are not at all focused on the cost. Although while we are on the topic, the concept of trying to strike fear into the community by threatening additional costs if we wait a year, let's put it into mathematical perspective. If we wait 1 year, based on Superintendent Thompson's numbers in his recent memo to the board, this would be an extra $5 or 1.4 cents per day for the average homeowner. I don't think anyone is going to cry foul if you wait 1 year to ensure that this plan works for the majority of the community. It's great that some kids are having their bus time reduced, but at whose expense? The proposed boundaries are now going to have kids that currently walk to Sanborn be bused to Winston. Kids currently walking to Winston Junior High are going to be bused to Sunling. Sunling is much farther away from a large portion of the Winston Park neighborhood that currently goes to Winston Junior High. And all of the Northeast kids will be bused to Winston for 6th to 8th grade. This is farther for most of them than Sunling. Superintendent Thompson stated at last night's Winston Junior High meeting that there will basically be no savings from a transportation standpoint, despite the $1 million estimate that has been touted from the beginning. The STEM school. How hard is it to say we will transform Jane Addams into a school appropriate for 6th to 8th graders so they don't have to use bathrooms and desks and chairs built for 2nd graders? We are committed to providing locker rooms, we are committed to adding science labs, and all of the other changes that would need to be made to this real academy intended for science, technology, engineering, and math. You made fancy drawings for the Ela Road School, but you can't commit to providing Jane Addams with locker rooms and science labs. This shouldn't require 3 years to figure out. Those pesky code violations, are they not violations? I'm confused, as Dr. Thompson has made it seem that the district's own architect has grossly overstated the importance of these repairs. Or are you saying that these items aren't important? Are they just a smokescreen for when you want it to matter, like with Sanborn? Actually, let's talk about Sanborn. We've now been told that the life safety costs of $100 million can be completed by maybe only $25 million, and primarily with in-house staff. So back to that math thing, we're discounting the total cost by 75%. Does this mean it should only cost $1.7 million to bring Sanborn up to code instead of $7 million? Lastly, Osage Park. The rendering shows that the school's footprint equals about 26% of the total acreage. Per the Palatine Village manager, the village has not been involved in traffic studies or discussions as to whether or not this property can handle the proposed 186,000 square foot school plus community community building? Will the neighborhood accept a 3-story building, or even a 2.5-story building with partial basement and windows just above the ground? Will they accept the additional traffic this is going to bring to the neighborhood? Will the neighborhood suffer from water runoff during heavy rains now that it has a fraction of the open land left? Again, too many unanswered questions. So I am a firm believer that we cannot succeed as a community or a society if we only point out the problems and don't provide possible solutions. Here are some ideas that I would ask the board and this administration to consider. Whether the referendum passes or not, please hold town hall meetings, perform surveys, phone, online, by mail. If we have 3 years to figure out all the details you haven't wanted to provide or claim you couldn't, I'm sure we can take a few months to adjust this plan so that most are happy, not just some. Strongly consider other sites for the Northeast Community School. Consider forming dual language schools. Consider redrawing boundaries despite the fact that it may be considered political suicide. This may mean splitting the low-income population between Sunley and Winston Junior High. Barrington does it successfully with middle school kids grades 6 through 8. So can we. Thank you.
We're going to move on to action items, please. Item 16, 10, 20, the personnel report. May I have the suggested motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the October 12, 2016 personnel report as revised, including the following recommendations. Recommendation of termination Jonathan Muska, and recommendation of termination Dwayne Pianataro.
Discussion? Roll call.
Chapman?
Aye.
Bradford?
Aye.
Durian?
Aye.
Hunt?
Aye.
Morrison? Aye. Seaver?
Aye.
Babcock?
Aye. Motion carries. Item 16, 10, 21, a bid award for custodial cleaning supplies. May I have the suggested motion, please?
I make a motion to award contract for custodial cleaning supplies bid 17-004 the following 7 companies. Baker Company Woodvale, $7,634 and 34 cents. Hemcraft Chicago, Illinois, $18,175 and 70 cents. Metro Professional Products of Springs, Illinois, $24,425. Pyramid School Products, Hampton, Florida, $1,036.20. Supply Works, Lombard, Illinois, $205,000, $205,815.50. Unipack, Portland, New York, $30,390. Heritage, Jeffersonville, Florida, $5,246. Total bid, $292.72 and 74 cents.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bradford?
Aye.
Durian?
Aye.
Hunt?
Aye.
Morrison? Seaver?
Aye.
Babcock?
Aye.
Chapman?
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to the consent calendar. Does any board member wish to remove anything from the consent calendar at this point? Then may I have the suggested motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Durian?
Aye.
Hunt?
Aye.
Morrison? Seaver?
Aye.
Babcock?
Aye.
Chapman?
Aye.
Bradford?
Aye.
During our last period, on September 9th and October 6th, there were 7 requests and responses for information under the Freedom of Information Act. On September 7th, a request was received from Scott Hare, Palatine, Illinois. The response to this request was sent on September 14th. On September 8th, a request was received from Jared Rutecki, Better Government Association, Chicago, Illinois. On September 15th, a 5-day extension notice was sent. The response to this request was sent on September 22nd. On September 20th, a request was received from Jennifer Monday, Inverness, Illinois. On September 27th, a voluminous request notice of extension of time, 10-day notice was sent. The response to this request is still pending. On September 22nd, a request was received from Mindy Ruckman, Illinois Policy Institute, Springfield, Illinois. On September 29th, a 5-day extension notice was sent. The response to this request is sent on October 5th. On September 23rd, a request was received from Angela Santoro, Palatine, Illinois. The request was withdrawn on September 29th. On September 26th, a request was received from Katie Schmeiser, investigative producer, NBC5 Chicago. The response to this request was sent on September 26th. September 28th, a request was received from Daniel Gassick, Wheaton, Illinois. The response to this request was sent on September 29th.
Yes. Let's see. Contributions? No?
No, there were no contributions that we were aware of this. Sorry.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Roll call. Khan.
Aye.
Morrison. Aye. Seaver.
Aye.
Babcock. Aye. Chapman.
Aye.
Eckert.
Aye.
Gray.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.